All right, welcome everyone. Good evening. Happy Wednesday night, and welcome to our panel, The Future of Policing in Arlington. We have a really large group tuned in today, both on Zoom and on Facebook Live. And I know this is a topic front of mind to many in Arlington. If you're watching us on Facebook and you think this is something your friends would like to hear, please consider sharing this Facebook Live with your friends. We have a really great panel today that we're looking forward to. So we hope you walk away feeling better informed about what the future of policing looks like in Arlington. My name is Hannah Dannenfelser. I'm the chair of the Arlington Committee of 100, and I'm going to be your moderator this evening. Police practices and police reform have been major national conversations for a while now, with 2020 bringing even more attention to the relationships that police departments have with community members, especially people of color. We know that with an incredibly engaged community here in Arlington, priority national conversations become discussions and policy evaluations in our backyard. These discussions are happening all across our community, including in nonprofits, churches, social media, and even in new organizations that have formed in response. This year, Arlington County formed the Police Practices Work Group, which brings together community leaders, police and police department representatives to evaluate existing police policies and practices to make recommendations to the county manager. Tonight, our speakers are going to talk to you about the future of policing in Arlington, including potential reforms and what we can expect to see in the future. I am really excited about the group we have gathered here tonight. It is a really all-star panel. We're featuring Marcia Thompson, who is the Police Practices Work Group external consultant, Kent Carter, who is the vice president of the Arlington NAACP, and Andy Penn, who is the acting chief of the Arlington County Police Department. For those of you who are interested in learning more about our speakers' work after this program, I encourage you to browse their websites as a starting point for your reading. You can screenshot this slide, and then we're going to have it up again at the end of the program if you want to pull these links. All three of these would be really great places for further research. And then, of course, the Committee of 100 at the bottom. So for our audience tuning in tonight, you can submit questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we're going to get to as many questions as possible. I will say that if your question is concise and to the point, it will be a lot easier for me to read in live time, and therefore it's going to be a lot easier for me to pose it to our panelists. And in Arlington Committee of 100 tradition, all questions should be in the form of a question. So I just want to take a minute to let you know we are an all volunteer run organization, and I want to thank our fantastic board for their work, including our program committee, co-chaired by Patrick Hope and Jerry Laporte. Adapting to this virtual environment has opened up new opportunities for us, and I'm excited to say that we're reaching a much broader audience in this virtual environment. So this has been a great learning experience for our board in pivoting while sticking to our mission. To stay in touch with us, please like and follow our Facebook page. We publish our events through email announcements as well as Facebook events. So you can hear about our upcoming programs and share them with friends who may be interested as well. One part of pivoting in this environment was evaluating Arlington Committee 100 membership as we go virtual. In the past, we've asked our supporters to become members of the Arlington Committee of 100 to support our mission and work to provide nonpartisan and timely educational content. This year, we decided to pause on collecting membership dues, and the Arlington Community Federal Credit Union provided the sponsorship to support the Arlington Committee of 100 in a transitional year. Some of you in the audience may know me, and you know that my day job is actually working at the credit union. So I can say on behalf of both organizations that this was a really great partnership for furthering community education and supporting Arlingtonians and learning about key issues that are critical to Arlington's future and success. If you're tuning in today, I want to encourage you to mark your calendars for our upcoming two-part series on Arlington's economy. The registration will be live very soon on the website at the bottom of this slide. In December, we'll be reflecting back on 2020 as a year of change and resilience, featuring panelists who have had firsthand experience. That program will be on Wednesday, December 9th at 7 p.m. In January, we will kick off 2021 by looking forward at what the future holds for Arlington's economy. Our panelists will be experts and leaders who speak towards the landscape of what is to come. You can tune into that program on Wednesday, January 13th, also at 7 p.m. So that's all for me. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers, who you are really here for. You'll hear from me again a little later in the Q&A. So we're going to start with Marcia Thompson. Again, she is the Police Practices Work Group Consultant. She is the Vice President of Law Enforcement Consulting for Hillard Hines. Her role, she goes around the country advising law enforcement organizations, particularly on civil rights and law enforcement issues. So we're really lucky to have her with us here tonight. Marcia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm going to go ahead and start up a PowerPoint to start this discussion. So let me share my screen with everybody. Can everybody see it there? I'm hoping that that's a yes, that you guys can see that. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is the Police Practice Group, which is a group that got started early. I think discussions probably started early in June or July or before I got engaged. My engagement with the process was in late July, early August. And as Hannah mentioned, I'm currently the Vice President of Hillard Hines, and we do police reform, technical assistance, police assessments all over the country, domestically and internationally, actually. And I've been in and out of police reform since 2001. So I've been doing police reform all over the country since 2001 with Hillard Hines since 2014. And then again, recently re-engaged with Hillard Hines in 2019 as Vice President for Law Enforcement Consulting. So as part of that, I got reached out by Arlington to come out and help with what they're calling the Police Practice Group. This is actually a copy of a PowerPoint that we did early on in August when we introduced it to the community at large. So if those of you who are on that, you will see that these are similar slides, but the intent for the PPG has not changed. But for those who didn't see that PowerPoint, it's a good opportunity to give you an introduction to what the PPG is about. My role is really to come in and assist the county. One of the things that I'd like to say is, oftentimes when we are called in as an organization, we're called in to help because something has gone wrong with the police department. And in this scenario, that is not what occurred. In this scenario, it was not an incident that sparked this, but just a national understanding that police reform is necessary. And in Arlington, they wanted to be progressive and actually be introspective and look at some of their key areas and find out if they were in line with best practices moving forward. So I'm always delighted when we get an organization that does that. It doesn't happen as frequently as I would like, but it does happen. And in this case, that's what happened with Arlington. We were approached to come in and take a look, not because of an incident, but because they wanted to have someone come in and give a perspective. So as part of that, what we are doing with them is looking at their policies and their procedures. And they have a group that they set up as there's a 15 members, and I'll go through all their names. You can see them on the screen. And they all represent different aspects of the Arlington community. I believe one of our other panelists is also on here as well. So we have Allison Carpenter, who's with the Public Defender's Office. We have Cicely Whitfield, who's a resident and advocate. We've got Dave Fitzgerald, who is part of the Community Services Board. We got Devanshi Patel, social justice lawyer and also a resident. We've got Liz Valderrama, who's the ED for Offender Aid and Restoration. We've got Kathleen McSweeney, who's an active resident and advocate in the community. We've got Kent, the Vice President of the Arlington branch of the NAACP. We have Kim Phillips, who's the founder of Arlington. I can't even see it because my thing is blocking here real quick. Let me move that, make sure I get it title. Arlington for Justice. We have Latasha Chamberlain, who is with ACPD. We've got Matt Pua. I probably butchered his name, but he's a sergeant with the police department as well. We've got Naomi Verdago, who is also an advocate and very active in the mental health and disabilities community. We have Rodney Turner, who's an attorney and Arlington resident. We've got Sal, who's the ED for BUGATA. We also have Scott, who is part of Arlington PD and the president of the Coalition for Police. We have Whitney, who's a co-founder of Black Parents of Arlington. And I believe those are all of our members. It's myself and Julie, if you want to see our faces. So let me talk a little bit about Julie. So on my side, I have also a couple of other members that are not listed in this presentation that are helping with the police department assessment. So I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. But on that team with me, I have another attorney and a PhD whose expertise is in organizational development, HR, and racial bias and data. So that is Dr. Troy Coleman. And then I also have another colleague from Hillard Heights, Robert Bomer, who's also an attorney, former professor, also ran the Criminal Justice Center at University of Illinois in Chicago, and is now my colleague and also vice president within our law enforcement division. So those are the members of my team that are working on the internal assessment of the police department policies, and I'll touch on that in a second. And then Julie Shedd is also my co-facilitator for the police practices working groups, which I will highlight in a moment. And she is with George Mason. As you can see, she's one of the deans for the School of Conflict and Analysis and Resolution. So Julie and I both co-facilitate our working groups, and those members that you saw earlier are parts of the working group, and several of them have actually volunteered to be chairs of the police practices working groups. The external assessment, which is the part that the team that I mentioned that was not on the screen, is helping to assess with, there's 6 policy areas that we're looking at, and they're listed here. I'll just go over the headings. You can see the definitions, but primarily reviewing use of force policy, looking at policy on training and supervision, particularly when it comes to implicit bias and CIT. We're looking at technology, body-worn cameras and in-car cameras, recruitment and retention, and how people are recruited to the police department, what's the process for bringing them on. We're also looking at the internal affairs process, again, how someone would file a complaint, the policies around that, and what's the process that their policies lay out. And then also data and statistics that are collected, how they're collected, and what was collected before the law changed last year in July that had other mandates that were involved. So again, the assessment itself is a policy assessment. There is a difference between a department assessment and a policy assessment. So I want to make sure that that's clear, because a lot of people may misconstrue that the entire police department is being assessed. They are not. It is just these 6 policies and these 6 policy areas. And so we're looking at their policies to compare those to best practices and national best practices, as well as what we call next practices, what maybe other progressive departments are doing in the country, and seeing where Arlington falls in line with those. So that's what the external assessment is doing. It is ongoing, and we are, it's a lot of data to review, even in 6 areas. We do, as a firm, do department-wide police department assessments, and we've done them all over the country, East Coast, West, South. We've been in, I don't know, I could probably say hundreds of departments at this point in my career. But we are, I know personally, I'm in probably about 7 police department assessments nationally right now, where we have ongoing complete bottom-up reviews of the departments, which would include everything to include policies, practices, procedures. And again, this is just a policy review for Arlington at this point. The other aspect is the PPG working groups, which are running at the same time as our policy review. And they are looking at 4 areas. The 4 areas that they're looking at are civilian review boards with civilian oversight. And the group is looking at all different models. Myself and Julie have split these up. So I attend 2, she attends 2 each week. We're just there as research assistants, advisors, bringing in students from the university. I also have law clerks that assist with research. So we're just there to help them come up with their idea of what best practices are in these areas. And I would say that these groups are very progressive. They are doing some outstanding work. There has been opportunity to be transparent with the community. We have had similar sessions like we're having today on Facebook Live, where we have brought in speakers from other jurisdictions to talk about what they're doing. For instance, on civilian review, we had the past president of NACO, which is the National Association for Civilian Review or Civilian Law Enforcement Oversight, I believe, NACO, come in and talk about the models across the country. We've had crisis intervention approaches come in for our CIT, which is the role of police departments providing mental health services. We've also had non-police responding models come in and talk to our group as well as to the community. We've had our traffic group, and I believe they have done some outward facing groups as well to the community, as well as some inward facing speakers. And then we're also exploring alternative dispute resolution, restorative justice. So we're looking at alternatives to diversion programs for non-punitive ways to handle things that traditionally may be handled by the police or the court system. So those are the 4 areas that the working groups are looking at. They started about the same time that we started our internal assessment of the police policies and have been ongoing. And myself and Julie, as well as all those members that you saw earlier on the slides, are actively participating in those. And we have 4 chairs that are chairing those PPG working groups as well. Let me get out of that. Let me stop sharing now. Get back on screen. Okay, so we have 4 chairs. Rodney Turner, Devanshi, Allison, and I missed one already, Naomi. Those are our 4 chairs. And so the group has been divided into those 4 buckets, and many of those members cross over on each of the 4 working groups, and they meet weekly, if not more, to talk about those topics. So that's where we're at this point. Throughout the process, like I said, we've had transparency, open sessions where people can come in. We also had a transparency page, which I believe just closed this month, because we're wrapping up, hopefully, our assessment here shortly. I don't know exactly when, but we're in the middle of still reviewing data for that. But our public comment, we also had some focus groups from the community on some of the topics, and people were invited to attend those. They came out and gave some really good feedback. We also had some police groups come in and give us some feedback on some of the topics as well. The open forum feedback was open every day, and it was on all 6 policy areas as well as the 4 topics. And people gave their feedback on that, and that was shared with the working groups as well as with the assessors to get community say as well. So that's where we're at on the PPG. It is ongoing. I believe it's supposed to go out until the early of next year, 2021. And so eventually the outcome of that will be a report from the PPG working group with some ideas on how to reimagine, I guess that's the word we are using right now in policing, reimagine what Arlington County can do and look at some very creative ways of furthering policing in Arlington County. And then also looking at the policies to see if there are any areas of improvement that the department is going to embark upon. And so once we finalize both aspects of the PPG, there will be something formal coming out of the county from both of those aspects that will be shared in many different forums. And we're still working on the transparency program for that, but you'll be hearing more about that as we move forward. One of the other questions that was posed to me that I'd love to talk about is
Marcia, I'm just going to do a quick time check so we can make sure to have time for Q&A. So if you wouldn't mind just go ahead and wrap it up. That'd be great.
Oh, no problem. Am I my 10 minutes?
Yes.
All right. Well, I will save the other stuff for your questions, because I know you guys are probably asking me the questions that I was going to answer in advance. So thank you, Hannah, and I'll pass it on to my next colleague, and I look forward to your Q&A. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcia. That was fantastic. All right, we're going to go next to Kent Carter. He is the Vice President of the NAACP here in Arlington. He also, within the NAACP branch, he chairs their Criminal Justice Committee. So I will turn it over to you, Ken.
Can you see me? Camera's good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Hannah. First of all, and all the members of the Arlington Committee of 100, and to my panelists, my colleagues that are here today. It's truly an honor to present to you guys today, and thank you again for the invite. Let me share my screen here and get started. As Hannah was saying, I'm currently the Vice President of Arlington Branch, NAACP. Let's see. And the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee. And also I was appointed to the PPG group as well. So I'm also doing that. And it has been a complete honor. So I just want to give you guys a little background on the NAACP, our branch, and kind of how we've been involved in criminal justice here in Arlington and kind of how we look at it going forward. A little bit on the history of the NAACP. It's a nationwide organization with actually over 2 million members right now, according to NAACP. But it was founded back in 1909 in New York City. Kind of interesting fact that a lot of people that are not involved with the NAACP are not aware of. It was actually founded by a diverse group of white progressives as well as African Americans. So it's not strictly an African American association. It's made up of diverse members from all walks of life. We are a complete volunteer association here in Arlington. Let me see here. Yeah, complete volunteer, and we're nonpartisan as well. But these were the founding members of the national NAACP back in 1909. My slide here. So a little history on our local branch here in Arlington. As you guys are aware, back the school system was still segregated even up until looks like 1941. The local branch was established in 1940, and a lot of this was due to the segregation in schools. They wanted to integrate the schools. And so our founding member, I'll go back on the next page here in a second, but formed the local branch and wanted to go along with the national let's see here, national policies that were going on in the schools and get the schools integrated here in Arlington. So that was the big push of our local branch here in the 1940s. So Esther Cooper was actually one of the founding members. She was a local resident here in Arlington County, and she helped organize it along with Dr. Herbert Marshall, who was the first branch president. As you can see, it was first organized in one of the local churches here. And here were the initial members that were elected to the first branch. Esther Cooper was actually the first president. The Reverend Charles Green was the vice president. Jesse Washington was the treasurer. Emma Mosley was the entertainment chair, and Preston Harris was the legal redress. So that's just a little brief history on how our local Arlington branch was formed back in 1940. Here you can see, my slide here. Here was one of the letters that went out to the school board back in 1941, addressing the issues of non-segregation, basically at Hoffman-Boston back then. And, when the local chapter was formed, this really led to the integration of the schools here in Arlington, and it was, it was a big deal, obviously, huge. This one was signed by Esther Cooper, and you can see some of the demands early on to help with the school system there. Currently, here are the elected officials of our branch now. Julia Spain is the president. As you guys know, I'm the first vice president. Keisha Tinsley is the secretary. William White's the treasurer. And I'll go on, but we have some at-large members as well. Our elections will go next month, and we'll elect the new administration in for the next 2 years. We serve a 2-year term. Again, it's all volunteer work, so A big shout out to, everyone involved and everyone that helps us. We have, I think anywhere between 300 and 500 members right now. And, some of those are, redoing their dues and stuff like that. So we're very, very much involved in the community. Let's see here if I can go back. I think I can end my slide here. But we're very much so involved in the community with criminal justice reform, since that's today's topic. In the past, we've had members on the civil review board for the county that was assigned there. So they've helped out there. We've been involved on the Chiefs Advisory Committee that meets quarterly. We've had a member on there for the last several years. One of the big things that we do here at the branch is we have a lot of engagement, not only with the police department, but with the county officials, both elected and staff, the local, state, and federal delegates and congressmen. We have a lot of engagement with them as well, because, as a volunteer organization, when issues do come up and we have concerns and complaints with our members or other people in the community, we have to have that open dialogue with these individuals in order to try to get these issues resolved and see what's going on and see how we can best help, the community out. We've had a good open line of communication with the police department and with the county manager and the school board and stuff like that. So we've been able to reach out when issues do come up and try to get these resolved. I think one of your members, Delegate Patrick Holt, back a few months ago, we had several meetings with him. That's when the body worn camera initiative came out that we had. We actually started a petition here in Arlington to get those implemented because the police department did not have those at the time. I think they'll be implemented in January, but we got well over 10,000 signatures with that, and it had a lot of community dialogue with the police department, with county officials. Patrick Hope was, instrumental in helping us get that, across the threshold, and just giving us guidance from a state perspective on what they were looking at. And as you can see, I think one of the questions was the type of legislation, that's affecting the police department right now, or criminal justice in this area that was just passed. You see the civilian oversight legislation that was passed, and a lot of issues with training and improvement, dealing, specifically with diversity and inclusion, that's going to be implemented as well. So, we look forward to continuing our work and continuing to try to help out and implement these new changes, and just, making sure that, minorities and all people from Arlington are represented, when these laws and changes are made, because I think a lot of times, the unrepresented, if they're not at a seat at the table, I think a lot of times decisions get made and policies get changed, and, they can have, second or third order effects on communities of color and different people like that. So I think it's great that, we're being involved in the process and able to help, shape policy in some regards. I think that's all I have, Hannah. Again, I appreciate the time and look forward to the Q&A from everyone. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kent. We really appreciate your time. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Andy Penn. He's the acting chief of police for the Arlington County Police Department. He started in his acting role back on September 5th, following Jay Farr, who had retired as the chief after 30 years of service with the department. So Andy's been serving as the chief of police, as the deputy chief of police since 2015, and he spent 28 years with the department. So Andy, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Anna. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you tonight. I think my slides are showing.
Yep, I can
Okay.
see them.
Perfect. So I have several slides, and a lot of the things that are on the screen I'm going to touch on briefly. So I won't cover everything that's listed there, but I wanted to, start with our mission, which is listed, which is very broad. But in 2015, we came up with 3 key initiatives to really focus the efforts of all members of the police department The initiatives are community engagement, transportation safety, crime control, prevention and control. So they're broad too, but this is something that every member of the agency is supposed to be working towards each one of these initiatives in everything that they do. The Arlington Police Department's been in existence in 2020 is our 80th year anniversary of being an agency. And I joined in the early 90s. And since the latter part of the 90s, this agency has been committed to a community policing type philosophy. There's been several different iterations of what the community policing looked like throughout the years as needs or staffing levels or community challenges or whatever the issues were changed, we had tried to adapt and make the change. And I think that's the important message is, we are very committed to working with the community. We have found over and over again that our success comes from the partnership that we have with the community, the relationships that we build, and the opportunity to work collectively to address whatever the concerns are. We've always believed that an engaged community is a safer one and recognize that the authority and trust given to us by the community is something that we have to earn on a daily basis from every interaction that we have. One topic that comes up frequently is about our hiring process and the demographics of the agency. The numbers that are on your screen are a little bit old. I mean, they're from June of this year. But the important message for me when I look at this is on the far right-hand side where it shows our last hire since January of 2018. I forget the number. I forget exactly how many that is. But we work hard to be representative of the community that we serve in our demographics. And you can see by the numbers, the first column is the Arlington community demographics based on the last 2010 census. The middle column is where we currently are as far as agency demographics as of June. But, we've put a ton of effort into recruitment and retention. I mean, it's a challenging time to recruit generally for the law enforcement profession, but particularly because of COVID. Our recruitment staff have had to be very innovative in the way that we connect and interact with potential applicants. And I'm very happy that we continue to have significant number of applicants. We haven't really seen a drop off in our applications, which is really beneficial. One thing that's somewhat unique about Arlington is we do require 60 college semester hours of credit. A significant portion, the overwhelming majority of our staff actually hold a bachelor's degree, and we have many with advanced degrees, many attorneys. But when looking at the hiring, I get asked a lot about what the process is. So real quickly, the chart on the bottom of your screen just shows how long it takes. It's really closer to the 12-month mark from the time we hire somebody to the time that they're able to go out and function as a solo police officer. So just to get to the hiring part, it begins with the recruitment. The person has to apply, but then our process involves a written test, a physical assessment test. The person has to go through a panel interview. There's the polygraph, there's a comprehensive background investigation, a psychological exam, as well as a medical assessment. So a lot of process takes some time, but one of the challenge is that we're all sort of in the region competing for the same applicants. So we have maintained our standards as they have been for years because it's clear to all of us that the people that we hire today are the future of the agency. So we want to make sure that we're hiring the best people to work in this agency to serve this community. And I think we're having, good success with that. Oops, sorry. After 9/11, or since I joined here 28 and a half years ago, this agency's always had a real commitment to training. As you can see on your screen, our staff average over 55,000 hours of training annually. That does count basic training, but it's, as law enforcement has gotten more complex, we have had to really expand our training to make sure that we're equipping the officers to deal with whatever scenario may come their way. So just talking about the entry level training, every new officer the academy is about 800 hours of formal training, followed by 630 hours of field training. Some of the topics of our training are listed on your screen. But I think one of the things that's a little different here is it's not just that training. Before the new officers even go to the academy, they receive in-house training. Before they even are sent to the academy, they go to the academy and they come back. And then there's post-academy training where we really focus on Arlington specific because our academy is regional. At that point, they go to field training. And then after field training, there's post field training to make sure we really strive to make sure that we're providing all the tools and skills necessary to be effective in policing in this community. Most of our training centers around de-escalation techniques. And all the different types of training we do really reiterate de-escalation. Since 2016, officers to the agency go to crisis intervention training within 6 months of completing their field training. We felt it's better once the officer has a little bit of time on his or her own to be out and be the police and then go to this CIT training, which is more meaningful at that point. We're currently at a position where about 75 to 77% of our frontline patrol staff have received this training, and we will continue to do it as the new officers come out. One of the centers for us is communication. It's been clear. I mean, I think we've always tried to communicate well, and I think this is an area that we can't ever let up on. I mean, I think we have a lot of great partnerships and collaborative efforts across the county, but we're always looking for new ways. We're talking to Dr. Shed that Marcia mentioned to, find ways to get into communities that we're not currently a part of, people that we're not currently talking to, because it's important that we have the relationships. It's equally important that we keep the community informed of what's going on with the police department, and also why and how we do some of the things that we do. We offer the Citizens Police Academy, which I think is a great opportunity because it really gives some real insight into how this agency functions, but it would be difficult to send, the entire Arlington population through it. So we're looking for ways to continue to push more information out so people get that glimpse of why we're doing some of the things we do and how we do things. And we're always open to engaging in the conversation. One of the topics that's come up many times are the new vests, where our officers now wear exterior vest covers. I think this was an opportunity years ago that maybe we didn't communicate as much as we should, because it does look more military-like. I get that. But the truth of the matter is when we switch to that, there's really a couple of driving forces. The first is the amount of stuff that officers carry on their waist is really hard on someone's back. And I never had a problem having enough waist space to carry all of the stuff, but smaller officers may have not enough room. So the vests really accomplish that. It really helps the backs, and it gives us space to carry the things that require to be carried. So we're constantly looking for ways to communicate. Some of the different the ways are listed on your screen, but this is an area that we will continue to focus in because it's incredibly important. Accountability and transparency. This is a big deal to us. We recognize the absolute importance that we hold ourselves accountable, because the authority we get does come from the community, and we have to live up to our standards, and we work hard to do that. I've been in internal affairs a couple of times, and routinely the number of investigations that we begin inside the agency are always larger than the complaints that we get from the community. We will investigate any complaint anonymous over the phone and email and mail on our complaint form. And our internal affairs section tracks every complaint and makes sure that it's investigated either by that section or a member of the supervisory staff. And we will get back to the complainant to make sure they know the outcome. Internal affairs is also...
I'm just going to give you a quick time check. So if you wouldn't mind getting towards the end of your remarks here.
Sure. Let me flip through. I want to flip ahead a couple of screens, and I'll share this PowerPoint. It can be sent out. Partnership, like I said, is key. We have always found that it's much better when we work with the community. The Arlington Restaurant Initiative, our homeless outreach program, AARI, the opioid recovery. These are great examples of that. And these are things that we will continue to find ways to collaborate with the community because it makes us more effective in what we're trying to do. Sorry, I didn't get finished. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andy. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists to go ahead and unmute yourself and turn your cameras on and we're going to get to the Q&A here. So I'm going to pose these questions to all of our panelists, and I'll let y'all decide, just self-select which questions you think are most applicable in your role to answer. So the first question is about the Virginia General Assembly, and John is asking about how recent criminal justice reforms will impact, especially it will impact your areas, but in particular, he's wondering about recruitment and retention for police officers.
What was that question, Hannah? Could you repeat it? I didn't quite hear.
Sure. How the recent criminal justice reforms passed by the Virginia Assembly will impact the community at large, but in particular, retention and recruitment for police officers.
Well, I'll defer that one to the chief.
The recent laws passed, and we're still digesting them all and going through them, to be honest. You know, a lot of the things that were specifically about the law enforcement, you know, it focused around data collection, a lot of training requirements, hiring requirements. I honestly, from our hiring process, I don't see any real changes. Training standards, some stuff about how to execute warrants. So I don't know that I see that the current, what's already been adopted by the General Assembly will be a problem for recruitment, because I think that a lot of these things are things that our agency already did. We're doing a lot more data collection, which I think is really great given that new law. And I think we will report that out at the end of the year. So I don't see it being the current approved legislation being a bar.
Great, thank you. Ken, do you want to make any comments there?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Yeah, I would just like to say, you know, the chief brought up data collection. I think that's so important. You know, some of the new legislation that was passed and some of the, I guess, the format and the way that it's collected and then also reported out. So we, you know, I think as a community, we would like to see, because data always comes up no matter what the topic is and no matter what the issue or situation is. So I think that, you know, the more transparent the data is and the more availability that the public has to it, I think that it will help solve, you know, a lot of issues that come up.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I agree with what Ken's saying. I mean, data is always a part of the conversation, and we're looking for ways to make sure we can continue to provide more data on a regular basis. We've started a monthly report that will come out for the first time this month. But we're also, you know, our historical data, like last year's crime and arrest data, you know, there are always questions. So I've been talking with Marcia to actually ask her agency, her company, to look at our data independently and provide their expert feedback to us. I think that, you know, that's a great place to start as we move forward into the additional data and the best way to report it and share it.
Great. And David is asking, oh.
I was gonna say, I don't have anything else to add to that. Andy already said what I was gonna say, so that's a good thing.
Perfect. David is asking about our public safety policies in general, both the policies that the PPG is reviewing and other policies outside the scope, including things like asset forfeiture. He's asking if those policies are publicly available in a comprehensive document.
Yes, they are. If you go to our website, there's a page that's our commitment to the community. There's a section in our website that it's commitment to community. And in that section, you'll find a link to get to all of our policies. They're online.
Right. John is asking about how this may impact the sheriff's office. I'm not sure, Marcy, if this comes under your umbrella here, if there's implications for the office of the sheriff in this.
I'm sure if the sheriff likes anything that we recommend to Andy and they want to pick it up, they're welcome to do so, but we're only looking at the police department's policies.
Okay. We had a couple questions around mental health, the integration of mental health professionals with the police department. One of them is about how the budgetary implications of integrating mental health professionals.
I mean, I'll say I know that the group, the civilian oversight, the group that's looking at mental health and policing is looking at models, various models from all over the country. They've had speakers come in and show models where There's no police involvement at all. I believe it was the Cahoots model out of Oregon that is a standalone model that is completely run by civilians. And then they've also had what we would call the co-responder models, where it's a combination of police and mental health professionals responding to calls. Which model is going to be adopted is what's still being under consideration. And again, I'm just an observer of the process and helping bring in speakers so they can consider that as a county. But as far as the budgetary I'm sorry, I can't say that word, how the impact on the budget will be, that will be up to Arlington to decide that once they decide on what kind of model they're going to pursue. So I'll defer that to the chief or to Kent, but I know that they are looking at various models, and that is one of the things that's come up. And some of those, like the Cahoots model, they're funded, to do that. And it's one of the better best practices on the West Coast that a lot of people would love to follow. But we do hear that it costs, and the city has to invest in that. And so that would be something that the county would have to look at if they were to go towards either co-responder model with more mental health professionals, or a total non-police response, which we haven't decided at the PPG level yet what model is going to be taken. So I'll defer to my two colleagues who are actually on those groups to answer any more if they talked about budget or any of those impacts.
I'll just piggyback on what Marcia said. As far as the recommendations and stuff that we're making on the PPG, budget concerns have never came up. And from what Mark Schwartz was telling us, let's make sure that we come out with some good, recommendations, and we haven't been limited at all as far as the budget is concerned.
So the only thing I would add is, we've been doing CIT training in partnership with the Department of Human Services for many years, and actually have many different ways where we partner and work collectively and collaboratively with DHS regarding mental health calls specifically, as well as programs like our homeless outreach program and our, the combined effort to battle the opioid epidemic. There are certainly, I would not argue at all that there are some mental health calls that probably do not need a law enforcement response. A lot of the challenge is balancing that to make sure that the safety of everyone is taken care of, while making sure that the person who is having an issue gets all the care and treatment that he or she needs. We currently do a co-responder model with DHS clinicians, which I think is very beneficial, but a lot of the conversation has been moving even further than that. But for now, we do have the co-responder model in our CIT program.
Great, thank you. Michelle is asking specifically about school resource officers, and she references that there tends to be higher average referrals to law enforcement for Black students and students with disabilities. She asks if you can talk a little bit about the pros and cons of having the school resources officers.
That's not something the PPG is addressing, so I won't comment on that, but I'll defer it to my colleagues if they want to. That's
Sure.
actually, it's specifically excluded from the PPG, and it's mentioned at the bottom that it's not a part of our scope. So
my thoughts regarding the SRO program is I find great value in it. I think that having an officer be a part of the school community is a positive thing. We're not there to be just security at all. We're there to be a part of the community, to be a mentor, to help teach, coach, and guide. The primary role is not to arrest or ticket people. That's not the point at all. Our goal is to actually embed ourselves, be a part of that community, be another resource for people in the community. As far as what's referred to us, I don't have any statistics in front of me or control over who contacts the police. The one thing that I think is, noteworthy in that is whether there's an officer in the school or not, if there's a crime in the school and whoever the victim is, a teacher, a student, a parent, if they want to contact the police and if they want prosecution, that still happens. then there's somebody who's not completely familiar with the day in, day out of the school community. A patrol officer would be dispatched. So I do think there's great value. I know the school board has put together a panel that's going to be looking at this over the coming months, and we're going to be a part of that. And data is going to be a part of that in the very beginning of it. So that will be forthcoming.
And I would just add, I think the perspective of the Arlington branch NAACP, we've issued a statement on this already, but you know, our statement was basically that we voted to remove SROs from the schools. And we took a hard look at the MOU that's been in place, because SROs have been in schools for the last, and I think Chief can correct me, I think 30 years or so about in Arlington County. And we just felt that, you know, the number of cases that referred out and the number of minority, Black students in particular, but other minorities that ended up in a juvenile facility or that were, you know, charged with a crime or, you know, just involved into the school system pipeline, it was just really alarming to us when you take a hard look at the statistics. And we actually, as a branch, we went to the juvenile facility and toured it and looked at those stats, and it was just alarming. And I do understand that, you know, obviously not all the students that are referred to SROs end up in the juvenile facility, but I think that it's just such a complex issue. You know, the disparity in the data that is shown, I think was a big motivator to why we decided to, you know, go against having SROs in the schools. And like Chief Penn was saying, you know, they're not there for security. You know, a lot of people think that SROs are there just for security, like for an active shooter or something like that, but that's not supposed to be the reason that they're there. And it even says that in the MOU. So I think all those reasons are reasons why we decided as a branch, and also at the state level, the Virginia NAACP at the state level, I think was also trying to lobby and push out, try to get legislation approved at the state level, you know, against SROs in schools.
One thing that I think will be important with the data when that work group convenes is we need to look at, you know, what's self-generated or initiated by a police officer versus what's reported to us. I just think that's one of the factors that needs to be part of the conversation. I don't know what it changes, but I think it should be part of it, and it will be. It's just not happened yet.
So we have a couple different questions, so I'm going to abbreviate them here, around implicit bias training for police officers, both around what the current policies are and what the anticipated future policies will be for that.
Sure. Our office, we've had implicit bias training across the entire agency. Actually, DCJS, the Department of Criminal Justice Services, who regulates all law enforcement in the Commonwealth, part of the requirements to maintain certification for a police officer is every 2 years there's a certain amount of training, and 2 hours of that has to be directed towards cultural diversity and topics that touch on anything related to cultural diversity. I do think it's noteworthy to point out that some of the new state legislation is more specific about that kind of training. We're waiting for some guidance from DCJS. It certainly, we've done grants as recently as this year to do more implicit bias training. It's something that we think is important to have, and to have officers participate in it at all levels. But we are waiting to get a little more guidance from DCJS on what the standards moving forward are going to be.
Great. Pamela is asking about the background checks for police officers coming in who are recruited. In particular, I think I'd be interested to hear a little bit about that overall, but Pamela is specifically asking if they're directly asked about belonging to hate groups or if they are screened for that.
Yes, when, once an applicant gets to a certain step in the process and it's fairly early, there's a 20-some page questionnaire that they have to fill out that touches on topics like that. That's self-reported, but a lot of what our background investigation team will do is talk to the people they list as references, but also look for other people to talk to. And the line of questioning it's all about their character, their integrity, any crimes or groups that people belong to. We make sure that we look at what we can with social media. And so everything that we can get to make the best informed decision that we can about who meets our criteria and who would be a positive contribution to this agency and this community, that's what we look for. I mean, it is an extensive packet. I mean, when I was in charge of our section that does the hiring, I mean, the folders that we would get would be, thick, a lot of different pieces of paper, but I wouldn't cut any of it because I think it's important that we do look at every different thing we can to make sure that we don't miss anything.
All right. We have a couple of questions here about the police officers, where they live, and wondering about the current police officers, where do they live, and what are best practices around police officers living in the communities they serve?
I'll let Andy answer the question about where they live, because I don't know without him giving the demographics of the department itself. But as far as a national, there's an ongoing debate on that. Many of the departments that we've done assessments in, and again, I'm not including Arlington in that because we are still in the process of doing our policy review of their department. But external, aside from Arlington, many of the departments that we've been in, there's been mixed opinions on that. Some departments say that there's concern. Communities definitely say there's concern that the officers don't have the commitment to the community if they don't live in the community. And that they visit it when they work there, and that, because they're visitors, they don't give the same type of approach if they actually live there, that they would be more inclined to do different things with the community if they were part of that community. So that's one perspective that we get quite frequently. And I say we as a firm when we do our assessments in many different cities. But then there's also the perspective from some of our police interviews that say, sometimes it's unsafe to live in the community that you police because you and your family would be going to the grocery stores with some of the same people that you might have bad interactions with, because sometimes you do have to lock people up, and sometimes they don't appreciate it. And so you would have that same type of opportunity. So there has been a mixed opinion on that. A lot of departments are going to incentives to get officers. There's some departments, they say the officers can't afford to live in our community. They love to live in the community, but they can't afford it based on the living wage that they get. So it really depends on the department, the financial incentives for the officers, and then whether or not the officers feel safe to live in the community. But I would say that there are a lot of departments that are going to offering incentives to try to encourage officers to live and work in their community so that they can gather that relationship, be available, be seen, and be visible, and also be involved in activities in the communities. So it's a mixed opinion, and it really depends on the community that's being served and the police department itself. But a lot of departments think it is the best practice to have more officers that live in the community than less. And Andy, I'll defer to you on your department's as far as statistics. I don't know.
The last time I looked, and it's been some time, I want to say around 30% of staff lived in the county. I do think it's important, in a perfect world, it would be great. One of the challenges that we hear from a young officer who, our starting salary is $56,000 and some change. And honestly, one of the things I hear from officers is that it's hard to live in Arlington. Arlington is an expensive community to live in. It depends on individual life. Does this spouse or significant other are they employed? Do they stay home with kids? I mean, all that factors in, but important to me is that I've met with every new class for years of new officers, and my message has always been the same to them, that whether you live here or not, you are absolutely a part of this community. Everything you do has either a positive or negative impact on this community. And our job is to make whatever it is, make it better and do what we can to affect positive change. So irregardless of where you live, you're absolutely a member of this community. It is one of the things that I harp on.
Debbie has asked, has there been any thought about rotating police in and out of direct community enforcement to minimize traumatic stress in the way that they do within the military?
No, is the short answer to that. I mean, it's something I think we need to spend more time thinking about. We've worked hard to try. It's important to us to have that community bond. So while I can't guarantee that, like on the evening shift, the same officer works the same area every day or every evening, but we do try to do that because we think it's important to build the relationships. So if I work in the Ballston area every evening, I'm going to get to know the people in the area. I'm going to get to know the business owners in the area. We do think that's important. And our staffing levels, we had to restructure in May of 2018 because our numbers got low, as is common across law enforcement in the US. And some of the opportunities to go to different assignments have been less, but we constantly look for ways to give people an opportunity to go do something different, even if it's for a month or for 2 weeks. It's a break from the day in and day out. It's also an opportunity to learn something new and re-energize. So we have gotten that far, but I think it's something, wellness is a big issue for us. We want to make sure that we're taking care of our staff because we do ask an awful lot of the men and women that work here. So I do think that should be part of our moving forward thought process.
And I'd like to add something to that. And again, this is not specific to Arlington. I know, what the chief just mentioned about we call it geographical accountability. So, when you, as he said, if you're a police officer, and even if you don't live in the community, you're accountable to that area of the community. And I know the departments that I've worked with as a professional and as administrator within law enforcement myself, we encourage our officers to have that accountability so that the community knows, Marcia, this is her area. And if something were to happen in this area, I know Marcia would be able to respond to that because she's familiar with the people, she's familiar with the businesses, and she's been working in this area to serve this community. But I think the underlying question to the person who asked it was more about what Andy just said about the mental health piece. I think that was the nexus of that person's question was, is there a process to look to see if an officer is having some type of trauma, either vicariously or, compassion fatigue, or just by the incidents that they're involved in within their beat. And if we're monitoring that, I know a lot of departments have early intervention systems where they look for triggering events within an officer's day-to-day activities that could be an indicator of some type of stress. And then that officer is brought in to address what may be that underlying stress. And so there are ways to monitor officers in a non-disciplinary way to see if there are some things going on. And there's also some other mental health programs and wellness programs that are, nationally recognized to do what I think this person is asking about, which is to really care for the officers' mental well-being, to make sure that if they're mentally sound, then obviously they're better serving themselves and their communities and their families. And I think that's what the panelist was asking about. So that is progressive thinking in law enforcement, and a lot of departments are getting grants. I know Andy mentioned earlier that there are certain grants he got for training, but there are grants that come out of the Department of Justice, particularly the Bureau of Justice Assistance, BJA, that focuses on officer safety and wellness. And they've been doing that since the Obama administration. I don't know if that had continued into the latest administration, but I know during 2014 forward, there were lots of grants to look specifically at officer safety and wellness and their mental health. So there are opportunities and some programs out there that departments can look at and try to integrate into their own departments to make sure the officers' mental and physical well-being are taken care of.
So can I piggyback on what Marcia said? She had great points. Wellness of our staff has been a primary issue for the last several years. And we have picked up some of the grants that Marcia mentioned. We actually have an equine therapy program, yoga. We've really invested a lot in our peer support team to make sure that we are training staff to look out for our staff when people need things. We've partnered with Virginia Hospital Center. So it is incredibly important to us to make sure that we're taking care of the people that work here and providing a host of different types of resources. So whatever somebody's needs are, there's hopefully something available to them. And if not, we have several people who are well-versed who can find whatever resource that the person needs. So a lot of efforts gone into that in the past couple of years, and it's something that we will definitely continue to push forward and find different ways to make sure that we're looking out for our staff. And as Marcia mentioned, the early intervention program, that is also something that we have to monitor. If an officer all of a sudden starts getting a bunch of complaints, there's an early intervention action where there's, a supervisory conversation to see if there's something going on, see if there's any resource needed. And this is something that we've been doing for some years.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the Q&A at this point because we're getting close to 8:15 here. I'm going to ask everyone to stick with us for just a few more minutes as we wrap up to our audience. First, I just want to really thank our speakers for taking the time to be here with us this evening. I know it's a late night, but we've really learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot. This is an issue I feel like I follow a lot, but I still feel like I have really learned a lot this evening. So we really appreciate your time. And I know it's going to be valuable information for our audience as they go back out into the community. Just briefly, I'd like to shout out to Moan Honda and Brian Marroquin, who have been behind the scenes tonight as our producers. If you saw me glance down, I'm there behind the scenes on my phone, making sure that I am on track so that I can show up and keep us all on track here. So thank you, Brian and Timon. I'm very grateful to you. Brian, would you mind putting the slides up here? Thank you very much. So if you're looking, as I referenced earlier, if you're looking to learn a little bit more about what we talked about tonight, I encourage you to check out these websites here. These are the organizations represented by all of our panelists, and there's a lot there. Andy, would you mind repeating, you had referenced earlier where on the website to find police policies, and I think that was really valuable. Would you mind repeating that for me? You're on mute, though.
Sorry. Sure. It's under commitment to the community, the Arlington County Police webpage. And we'll also post tomorrow the slides, since I didn't get through it, that'll be posted there too. There's a lot of different data on that website, commitment to the community.
Great. Thank you. So if you enjoyed tonight's program, if you enjoy the Arlington Committee of 100, we hope you'll come back and join us again. As I mentioned earlier, our next programs are a two-part series on Arlington's economy. In December, we'll be reflecting on 2020, specifically around change and resilience on Wednesday, December 9th, 7 o'clock. And in January, we'll be looking forward with Arlington's economy in 2021 and what the future holds. If you want to watch the recording from tonight, I know I'm definitely going to go back and watch it. Some of this content is better to digest a second time to really land. So I'm looking forward to that. You can see it in the live on our Facebook page. So and that's also if you have someone who you wanted to hear this program tonight, you can also point them to that live on our Facebook page. The Facebook page is Arlington Committee of 100. So you can search us and find us. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. We'll see you next time.